everybody, and welcome back to Etsy Myth Week Day 2. My name is Lauren Keplinger, and I am really hoping that this is going to work this time, unlike yesterday when we had a lot of issues. So if you are here live, please say hi so that I know that things are working and normal, unlike yesterday. So I am going to just dive right into the topic for today. If you are new around here, hi Michelle, thanks for saying hi so I know that people can actually log in. If you're new around here, my name is Lauren Keplinger. I teach Etsy sellers to build and scale their Etsy shops to a meaningful and consistent income. We are in the middle of Etsy Myth Week. Today is day 2. And yesterday we talked about renewing listings, quality score on Etsy, and if anything magical happens when you add more listings to your shop. Today we're going to talk through the Star Seller Program, and I am excited to dive into that with you because I know that there are lots of feelings, lots of opinions about it, as there always are on the internet. So before we get started, I do want to remind you that I have a live training happening on Friday at noon. It is through Zoom. It is not on Facebook because I don't trust Facebook to be totally reliable. It is called 3 Key Strategies You Must Master for Etsy Success, and it is happening at noon. You do have to register at laurenkeplinger.com/masterclass. And my program, Scale Your Sales, is also opening for enrollment on Friday, and I will be giving more details about bonuses and some limited time discounts and stuff at that masterclass as well. So I hope you will sign up for that, laurenkeplinger.com/masterclass. Okay, so let's talk about the Star Seller Program. This is a new program that was announced if you have been living under a rock and you have not heard about it yet. It was announced in, I think, the late summer of this year. I can't really exactly remember when they announced it and told us it was happening, but I think it was like late July, early August. And it's basically a metric or a way to rate sellers on 3 primary categories: how quickly they respond to messages, their reviews, and how many good reviews they get, and how often they are accurate in their processing time for the orders to ship. So how many orders are shipping on time as a percentage of their overall sales. Each of these metrics, they are rating us as a percentage. And so the goal that we're striving for now is 95%. Now, this program just started being implemented to actually be taking effect on September 1st. And it looks back at the last 3 months. So right now, the people who have the Star Seller badge, it was for June, July, August. Now we're in July, August, September, and it will update again on October 1st. We got the information on the dashboard before that, like I said, in July or maybe early August, I can't remember. But it is something that just started. So I did have some people in August being like, I think my sales are lower because of the Star Seller. Well, it had not even gone into effect yet. So it literally just started last week. I have heard a lot of people's opinions about the Star Seller, which primarily are negative. I don't know if that's just because people who don't think it's negative are less likely to chime in, but generally I would say people are not a really big fan of change. And so one of the things that I have heard from people is that they feel like this is a program that only benefits established sellers and that newer sellers are at a distinct disadvantage in competing for the Star Seller badge. So I kind of want to talk through that and work through that and give you my thoughts about it and how it impacts both newer shops and more established shops differently. I think that there are things about it that benefit newer shops. I think that there are things about it that benefit older shops. So I think that it's just a different impact for both people. So first off, before I go into my thoughts about it, I do want to agree with most of you, many of you, that have stated that 95% for a goal for these 3 metrics is really a very high standard for Etsy to hold us to. While I am a huge fan of Etsy, and I think that generally the things that they do are in the best interest of the platform as a whole, both the buyers and the sellers, I do also think that 95% is a little bit unrealistic for what we have to accomplish as sellers. It doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room, either higher volume shops or newer shops. So there's not a lot of room for error, but it is what it is. And with selling on any kind of platform, you kind of have to roll with the punches, which is why generally you don't see me getting particularly down in the dumps or frustrated with changes that Etsy makes, because first off, I've been around long enough that I've seen changes come and changes go, and people get really, really up in arms. Like if you've been around for more than 18 months, you remember ODR. People were super mad about ODR. And then when COVID hit, ODR like went out the window and we never heard about it again. So it's not really worth getting worked up about. I also just generally don't think it's worthwhile to get worked up about things that you can't control. So while I am not what I would define in any definition of the term laid back, I am not, but I just believe in stressing, especially these days, about only things that you can control. So when Star Seller rolled out, I will tell you that it honestly did not come as any bit of surprise to me at all. I have been talking in my Scale Your Sales student group for months, really for the majority of 2021, about how Etsy was majorly pushing for things that increase buyer confidence in the platform. This was, in my opinion, mostly brought on by COVID sales, mask sales, mostly mask sales for last year, and an inordinate amount of people popping up to list things on Etsy for sale, taking people's money, disappearing, sending, crap. And then Etsy has this whole dumpster fire of a situation on their hands where they have to deal with all these fraud claims, all these unhappy customers, all these open cases and chargebacks and blah, 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 blah. It was a PR nightmare, and it was really bad press for Etsy. And honestly, even on like a small scale, message boards I read, people I know in real life, all of that, people had a lot of bad experiences buying on Etsy. And we all know that unfortunately there are people who group us all together as Etsy sellers and say, they pitch a temper tantrum. I got this horrible product on Etsy, or somebody ripped me off or whatever, and I'm never buying from Etsy ever again. So this was sort of like backtracking for Etsy to say, whoa, we need to implement something that's going to help increase that buyer confidence, because so many people have had a bad experience now, and this has really been a mess. So it has been very clear to me for many, many months that Etsy has been pushing these metrics and these things that can help increase the buyer confidence. Namely, in my experience, quick and accurate shipping times and responses to messages. Getting good reviews on Etsy has always been something that they've pushed. Like that's kind of a given in any kind of e-commerce. You need to get good reviews on your products. So I also think that part of the Star Seller thing is a push to help them compete with other platforms who are known for a quicker turnaround time and less shipping problems, namely Amazon, although I personally think that Amazon's customer service and shipping speeds kind of are a little these days, but that's neither here nor there. Etsy has for a very long time even if we get frustrated about some of these things like free shipping, like faster turnaround times, processing times, all of that stuff, you have to recognize that while Etsy is different in the way that it is a handmade marketplace, it's smaller sellers and all of those things, they are also competing on a commercial scale with these larger companies like Zappos, like Target, like Amazon, like all of these people who are offering free shipping. And I understand you do not have to tell me that it is different and that those, large commercial productions don't have the same expenses and all of that. But the fact of the matter is, if somebody is looking for a monogrammed baby blanket from me, or they are looking for a monogrammed baby blanket from Pottery Barn, we are in direct competition with each other, even though it's a different vibe, it's a different, it's a different reason that you're buying from me or whatever. It's a different, it's a different situation, but not really. You still are in competition, if you want to call it that. You're in comparison with these larger productions. So this is a trend that has been happening for years, but really has accelerated dramatically with COVID and with all of this, issues that they had to deal with last year. Anecdotally, I will tell you that not responding to messages quickly and having overdue items has decreased visibility and sales for a very long time. I've been talking about these things for years. I have seen it happen in my shop for almost, I would say, as long as I can remember, really. And I have been preaching and stressing about it in my Scale Your Sales group for a long time. I know that I have talked about this before maybe on a live, definitely on the podcast, but Etsy used to have a customer service dashboard that was in as a part of your dashboard, just like the Star Seller is now. I wish I had thought to take a screenshot of it at the time, but this was prior to my coaching year, so I wasn't really thinking about it. But basically, it told you what your average response time was for messages, how many orders you had overdue, what your customer service ranking was. I can't remember if it gave you a letter grade or a number grade or what, but it was telling you how you were doing in terms of customer service and kind of accountability as a seller. They did away with that dashboard shortly after it went live, although they never really told us why, and they never really said much about it, period. But I have long since suggested and thought that while we are not privy to that information behind the scenes, they definitely were still tracking it. The anecdotal evidence through my own shop and through hundreds of students that I've taught made it impossible to ignore the fact that not responding to messages and having overdue orders and having long processing times would decrease your sales, and always has. I started noticing another trend about 6 months or so ago, which was that no longer was Etsy seeming to give you the bump in visibility when you printed labels off, but now it seemed like you got the bump in visibility when labels were scanned in at the post office. Again, noticing this trend is huge, even though Etsy hadn't told us this. This is something that anecdotally it was happening over and over and over again. And this is kind of where it comes in when people say but Etsy says this, and I'm like, okay, but sometimes what Etsy says and what Etsy's doing are different things. You can only, and sometimes they just don't say anything about it at all, and it's just happening behind the scenes, and you notice these trends. So I expect that this particular change probably happened to combat people whose orders were actually running overdue, but they were printing out labels and then not mailing the thing on time to skirt the issue. We've all had this happen to us. I've actually had it happen with places like Amazon, where you say okay, why is my order not shipping? You said it was only going to take 24 hours. And so they're like, oh, well, it is shipping. And they print off the label, and then it takes another week before it actually gets scanned in, which is super annoying as a buyer. So I think in reaction to that, Etsy implemented this change to make it more accurate. You can't just print off a label and wait 3 days to scan it in at the post office. That bump in visibility comes when it's actually scanned in. So to address the point that these things are hurting newer sellers and benefiting older sellers, I want to say that I really think that they're equally challenging for both old and new sellers for different reasons. Newer sellers are going to have a tough time getting the momentum going and reaching the minimum threshold of sales to even qualify for a Star Seller badge. You have to have, I believe it's $300 in sales in the time frame, so really only $100 a month, but to qualify for that. And you have I don't know if I would say more or less challenging. It's just a different level of challenge when you have lower volume to work with. So for example, if you only get 2 messages and you blank out and forget to respond to one of them, well, then you're going to have a 50% response rate, even though you've really only missed 1 message. So having one bad experience, one bad review, or 1 missed message or 1 overdue order or whatever is going to impact you more substantially if you have lower volumes, just because it makes up a larger percentage of your business. But I can tell you from the other side, as someone who has a higher volume shop, that it's not really a cakewalk on this side either. 95% is a crazy high standard to be held to, across the board really, but I actually wrote out my notes for this episode several days ago, but when I looked at it, I had 238 messages in my inbox during the star seller period for the last months. For me to hit 95% on that, I would have to respond within 24 hours to all but 12 of those messages. Similarly, I've had over 800 orders go out in the last 3 months. So of those 800, I'm only allowed to have 40 orders in that time frame that go out late, like 1 day late. And so that equals less than 13 orders per month that ship out late. That's just very little wiggle room when you are talking about the volume of the number of orders that you have to deal with. However, I want to stress again that I can almost guarantee that Etsy was penalizing my shop for overdue orders and late messages anyway, even before they were telling me that they were doing it through the star seller. I've already been penalized because I had overdue orders. I've already seen those trends. I just wasn't aware of what my exact stats were. The transparency wasn't there of knowing that I was only hitting 75% of orders being shipped out on time or whatever. I know that I have overdue orders, and that's something that I struggle with a lot with the volume of my shop, and particularly with not having an employee anymore, which I've talked about in my podcast. I don't really think that anything has changed here on the back end of Etsy. I just think now I have the knowledge to know where I stand and how much I'm not shipping out orders on time. As I said in the Facebook group recently, this is absolutely not something that I ever would have told people to do or to model after me. I struggle to get orders out on time. There is so much volume in my shop. I have constant supply issues, especially since COVID started. And so this is like a struggle for me personally as a product-based business owner. So that is not like 100% we need to be sending out orders on time, but it just is what it is. And that's the reality of my situation. So like I said, I don't really think anything has changed. Now I just know where I stand. I know what I need to do to improve, and the buyers know where I stand too. So that is a goal for me to strive towards, but it's not something that is consuming my whole life. I am hopeful that we will continue to see this Star Seller program evolve and work through some of the kinks that they have had since implementing it and that we have noticed as sellers, like local orders being hand delivered and international sellers not having the same access to affordable tracking as those of us in the US have. But overall, I think that as sellers on a platform, it is extremely important to us, to the longevity of our business on the platform, that the buyers who come to Etsy have confidence in the sellers that they are purchasing from. Do I think that the Star Seller program is a perfect program? No, I do not. But as with everything else and all of the changes that Etsy makes and always the changes that the internet makes, I think that this program is meant to protect both the buyers and the sellers from people who are not following through with what they are saying that they are doing. And I think that it has potential to move forward into a system that works well for us to protect buyers from unethical sellers, which helps all of us as sellers on the platform, and also to reward the sellers who prioritize good service and good customer experience, who have good feedback and good response times. So I'm going to click over and take questions in just a second. But before I do that, I do want to remind you again that the live training is happening Friday. 3 key strategies you must master for Etsy success. Friday, noon. You have to register. laurenkeplinger.com/masterclass. And the doors to scale your sales are opening then as well. All right, let me click over here and see if there are any questions. Does anybody have any questions? I actually don't see any here, so let me know if you have any. I see somebody saying they're facing a lot of interruption, so I hope that's not my internet. I really felt like I did this right this time, so I might have to move back to my house, which appears to have better internet than my office, although that's surprising because I live in the boonies. But does anybody have any questions about the Star Seller? Now that I have said my spiel, let me log over to just the general Facebook group because sometimes the questions don't show up for me. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So if you guys don't have any questions about what I've said, don't have any comments, I find that hard to believe. People almost always have lots of thoughts, especially when I tell people not to freak out. It's going to be okay. You know, the times are always changing. So Etsy, just like any tech platform, is always going to be changing. There's always going to be updates. We just got to roll with it. But again, like I don't really think that that anything dramatically, truly, I don't really think anything dramatically has changed about it. I just think that it is a matter of them being more transparent with us about what they're ranking us on. So I don't really think that's a bad thing. You know, I have talked extensively in my Scale Your Sales group about the trend noticing for myself, the overdue orders. That's always been a huge thing. So, all right. Rebecca said, have you seen any issues with star seller percentages and messages? I had a personal message from a shop that I never responded to that it seems to have set my percentage back substantially. Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think is a little bit hard to navigate with the star seller thing. It basically means that you have to respond to everything. Again, I will say that in the group, in my Scale Your Sales group, we have long talked about how you have to have the last word in conversations. So this has been something that has been true for a long time where, you know, if somebody's saying like, thank you, you're like, you're welcome. No, thank you. No, thank you. And go back and forth with this, which is really annoying. Etsy is now telling us with Star Seller that you don't really have to have the last word. You just have to respond to that initial message. I think that it is, I think that that's debatable. I have not noticed, it's a little bit harder with the messages to go back and see which ones they're counting as not having responded to. They don't give you that same like CSV file to download like they do with overdue orders and stuff. So I would say best case, you know, best practices is to respond to everything. Mary said, what if you respond on email? In that case, I would just double up and say, you know, hey, Mary, I just wanted to let you know that I responded to your email already, but I wanted to acknowledge this Etsy message as well. Done. You know, like you don't have to write the same, or I mean, you could just copy and paste the same thing you sent in an email, but you don't have to do that. I have people that will send me like multiple messages from, I don't know, a guest account or different accounts, or for some reason they're not all linked together. And I will say like, I just want to let you know that I saw this message too. I responded in the other one. And I haven't had any problems with that. People are not like confused or anything. They're like, okay, thanks. And that's that. Okay. Susan said, did you address the issue of local pickups? The only addressing of that I did was to say that I hope that at some point they work that out. I don't have an answer for you on that, unfortunately. I have seen people say that they just put in random tracking numbers and that's going to count it as having been shipped on Etsy. I think that that's a little risky if someone starts to question, you know, what this, like, I wouldn't do that personally, because I think if someone were to open a case against you, or if Etsy were to look into that a little bit more, it could be a little dicey if you're just like putting in random tracking numbers that don't go to anything or that don't go to the actual packages that you're sending. I think that my recommendation at this point would be, if you have local orders, it would appear that if you have local orders that you run through the Square Reader, they do not impact your Star Seller rating. That is what I have heard from people. I do not have one of those readers, so I can't verify that myself. But if you just have random local orders, like one-offs, I personally would not run them through Etsy at this point, unless you are actually shipping them. Now, I will say from just my own standpoint and my own opinion, people have different opinions about this, and a lot of it is dependent on how heavy and expensive your items are to ship. But I don't do any local pickup ever, and I never have. Because for me, like, this is a business and I'm not interested in meeting people in parking lots and sitting around waiting for them and having them not show up. And like, I'm not going to drive all over town and meet people to pick stuff up. So I ship everything. unless it's like my mom or somebody, but like I don't have my mom order through Etsy. But if it's just like a casual friend or acquaintance or whatever, I ship everything. It is easier for me to have that systemization. I'm already packaging things, I'm printing out labels, blah, 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 blah. I've never had anybody ask me for a local pickup, but I've also never offered it. So that would be my recommendation. Is if you have really heavy stuff that it does not make sense to ship it or it's going to be cost prohibitive, then I would not run them through Etsy. I would just send like a PayPal invoice, or if you have a different way of invoicing people, I would do it that way. Or if you have your own website, you could always run those sales through your own website. And if your items are not heavy and it's not cost prohibitive to ship them, I would ship them even locally. Michelle says, do you think if you're not a star seller, it will affect your Etsy ranking, as in Etsy not showing your products? In my opinion, I think that it will, yes, I think that at some point it probably will begin to impact your visibility. How much it impacts your visibility kind of remains to be seen. So the way that I see it right now unfolding is kind of along the same lines as like a bestseller badge or free shipping. So like Etsy tells us free shipping is prioritized in search, but how much that's prioritized, you don't really know. A bestseller presumably is prioritized in the visibility. How much it's bumped up, you don't really know. So, I think that I would actually say it's along the same lines as a bestseller badge right now. Which is like kind of a marginal increase maybe, but it's a little bit ambiguous. I think that Etsy has for many, many, many months already been bumping up the people who respond quickly to messages and ship things out on time. So I don't think it's a really dramatic difference from what was happening before. It's just that now we have those benchmarks of what we're aiming for. So yes, I do think sending out things on time and responding to messages and getting good reviews helps you to be more visible. I think that has always been true. So I don't really think the Star Seller badge has changed anything in terms of that. Samantha says, I was told by Etsy support that they can't tell where the message is originating from, so you have to respond or mark it as spam. I'm still at 50% mainly because I get no messages. Yeah, so Samantha, you would fall in the category of what I was talking about with newer sellers who say, while I say like, oh my gosh, I have all these messages coming at me and I've barely missed any of them and I'm still being docked for it. It's kind of the opposite, where if you are at 50% and you've only missed one message, that's really frustrating. But yeah, you have to respond in some way. If it is truly a spam message, mark it as spam. If it is somebody that's just like randomly telling, let's say it's a shop that's reached out to you because you bought something, all you have to do is say thank you, or thanks for letting me know, or, let me know if you have any questions. Like, you don't have to write them a book. You just have to acknowledge it in some way, and respond to everything. Tracy says, do you think the longer it takes a new shop to qualify will hurt the shop to the point that it can't overcome it? No, I don't think so. I don't think that, I would disagree in saying that, I have seen people say in the Facebook group and stuff like Etsy is only out for sellers that have been there for a long time. I don't think that that's true. There's no reason that Etsy would do that. Just from a financial standpoint, it benefits them to continue to grow as a platform and have newer sellers and volume of sales. I have people in my Facebook group who have had tens of thousands of dollars in sales just in the past few months, and they were brand spanking new to the platform in my Scale Your Sales group. So I really honestly don't think that there's anything that will hurt your shop to the point that you can't overcome it, other than having like a whole bunch of bad reviews right at the beginning. Like if you open up, you have 10 sales and you have 8 bad reviews, that would be very hard to overcome. But in terms of just not first off, you're reevaluated every single month. on a rolling basis, month by month. So, if you didn't qualify for it this time, the next time is like only 3 weeks from now. So there's plenty of opportunities to qualify. And I think that it's going to be something much like the bestseller badge that's like constantly evolving. So sometimes you have a bestseller badge, then somebody else's listing sells really well, then the trends change and it doesn't sell. It's something that's like up and down. It's not a stagnant thing. So, so I don't think that it's something that, first off, I don't think it's something that a newer seller can't qualify for. I think there's plenty of opportunity to qualify, but even if you didn't qualify, I don't think that it's something that you won't be able to to overcome and eventually get there. Samantha says, I'm struggling as it is with SEO, and now facing this as a search booster or squasher is scary. Yeah, I just don't, Etsy has told us in terms of like newer shops, newer listings, that those newer shops and newer listings individually get a slight bump when they're first added. So you're already getting, any kind of algorithm is like a recipe, except for you don't have like measurements that go into it. So it's like a recipe with no measurements. But like they're saying, a new listing gets a slight boost. If you offer free shipping, you get a slight boost. If your orders are delayed, it's going to be a slight detriment. But like how much any of these things impact is going to, it's a little bit of an unknown. I can tell you from my experience, the biggest indicator of my sales for a period of time, whether that's like a week or a month or whatever, is how many orders I have overdue. That is the number one thing that changes the number of sales that I have. So right now I have like 15 orders overdue because I'm out of supplies and they're delayed in transit. And so I have had much slower days the past few days. I guarantee you when I mark all of those as shipped, once they actually are shipped, I will probably have a few days that are like absolutely nuts. That is how that trend happens. And that has been true since long before Star Seller. Like I'm talking, before I hired my first employee. So like I hired my first employee almost 2 years ago. And the reason that I hired her was because I was having so many orders overdue that it was affecting my sales. And so I figured if I hired an employee, she could help me get things out on time, fast, better, more accurately. And then my sales would boost up because of it. So that was 2 years ago. And that has been true forever. So like I said, I really want to reiterate, and I know I said this multiple times, but like, I truly do not think anything has changed in terms of what they're doing with the algorithm. I think that they're just telling us about it now. It has always been true. Overdue orders, lack of message, or, messages that you're not responding to, bad reviews. Those things have always impacted visibility. Mary says, do you think living outside the USA and not being able to offer free shipping will affect an Irish shop? So this is another thing that Etsy like straight up tells us. I don't think that in terms of the star seller, it's going to impact anything, but Etsy says that shops that offer free shipping to US buyers are boosted in the search, regardless of where you are. I do not think that that is fair. I understand that it is not an equal playing field in that way. Unfortunately, they didn't ask my opinion, so which I don't know why, because I have lots of opinions, but so I think that if there's any way that you are able to offer free shipping to US buyers, then that is going to be beneficial. However, I have had students in my program who were outside of the United States and did not offer free shipping to the United States, and they've done fine. They had more local sales. So for instance, I can think of a student that was in England and noticed a really big shift towards other buyers that were also in the UK. So it was like a more localized thing, but they were very successful with it and it worked fine for them. So I think that there is a boost in the search for having free shipping to US buyers. Etsy tells us that. That's not a secret, but how much of a boost that is kind of dependent on a lot of factors, and whether or not somebody's going to buy it anyway is going to be really dependent on your price point and what kind of buyer you're attracting and how much shipping actually is. For me, like when I see an overseas shop, for instance, I think I've talked about this before. My favorite Etsy purchase ever was like a cake or a Santa cookie plate that I bought from a seller in the UK, and I paid like $20 in shipping, but I freaking love that plate so much that I don't care. I would pay for $20 for shipping any day of the week. So I think it's really dependent on the product. Does anybody have any other questions? Thank you guys for coming and asking questions this time. I'm glad that people were actually able to find the video and I wasn't talking to myself like I did yesterday, but I hope that people have been able to go back and watch the video and the podcast from yesterday. This will also be a podcast. I forgot, I should have said that at the beginning in case people are not a big fan of video and like to listen instead. So all right, I don't see any other questions, but tomorrow I will be back here talking about 3 myths about expenses on Etsy that hold you back from being profitable on the Etsy platform or for understanding how to be profitable on the Etsy platform. So that will be tomorrow's myth busting day, and I hope that this was helpful, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for coming.